I'm sure obvious to all of you because you've been davening for years and years and years. But even though it's obvious, I think there might be some very, very important chidush in halacha. We're talking about halacha here. It's to be honest, I just want to say, right, it's difficult for me these days to distinguish between halacha and hashkafa or iyun and bekiyas. So it's like it all kind of like in my old age, it all rolled into one thing. Either I know pshat or I don't know pshat. I don't have like iyun seder, bekiyas seder. So everything is this mixture. I also can't be machalek between Hasidus and like the Gra and right. Just if it's whatever helps us understand the the text. So davening. I want to narrow down so much there is to say about davening and tefillah, and specifically Shemona Esrei, which is what's called in halacha tefillah. Everything else is a preamble to the tefillah, or Hilchos Kriya Shema, not part of tefillah altogether, or after tefillah. There's all kinds of things, but tefillah in Chazal means Shemona Esrei, yes. And tefillah has its halachas. Specifically, I want to refer to the halachas of Kavana. And it's and if you look here, I'm looking inside because I didn't put all the words in, but the Rambam says in Hilchos Tefillah, Parak Ravi, he says, Chamisha dvarim ma'akvin es ha-tefillah. Afal pi she'igi azmana, a very important statement, that it comes zman tefillah. I know I need a daven now. It's important that I need to daven now. And there's 5 things you got to look for, even if you're going to miss zman tefillah. That's the right way to translate that. Afal pi she'igi azmana, the zman tefillah came. And if I start getting worried about these things, I'm not going to daven. So you say, listen, just daven mincha. No, afal pi she'igi azman tefillah, you have these 5 things are ma'akiv. Number 1, we'll go through very quickly, taras hayodayim. That's why we wash our hands, but taras hayodayim. Kisui ha'erva, you can't be naked in any way when you're davening, or against, in front of something that's naked. Taras makam ha'tefillah, you can't daven in a bathroom or in a place which is not clean. Udvarim ha'choif simoisa, you have to get rid of all distractions, which is already a little bit complicated when you come to shul. V'kavonas halev, and you have to have kavanas halev. So kavanas halev, you have to have kavana. And kavana is just like you have to have taras hayadayim to be, otherwise don't daven. That's what the Rambam says, you have to have kavanas halev. So the kavanas halev is part of the Chamisha Dvarim Hamakim. I think that of this list of 5 things, the one that we understand the least is kavanas halev. Because what does it mean? Kavanas halev. It means that you know what you're saying. There's a lot of possibilities here. It could mean pirush hamilim. It can mean that I'm having a lot of kavana in terms of like I'm focused on my whatever my problems or the problems of Klal Yisrael, and I'm really begging for those things to happen. Rahmana liba boy. What does kavanas halev mean? So the Rambam goes through every one of these 5 things. Taras yadayim, ketzad, how does kisui erva work, until he takes us to halacha yud tesvav rather. And in tesvav, the Rambam says, kavanas halev ketzad. Just like he asked ketzad by all the things, this thing is ma'akiv tefillah. And how does that work? What is kavanas halev? That's ma'akiv v'sat tefillah. Don't forget, it's ma'akiv v'sat tefillah. If you don't do it, it's better not to daven. That's what he says here. We'll learn that maybe we don't hold like this Rambam for whatever reason, but that's what the Rambam says. Kavanas halev ketzad, kol tefillah. So he says, let's be careful with the Rambam's words, as we always should. Kol tefillah she'ena b'kavana. He says, here's what I mean. Any tefillah that is not daven with kavana, which I say once again, I'm not sure what it means, even though it's a word we use multiple times a day. But kol tefillah she'ena b'kavana, ena tefillah. Sefelten tefillah. It's not a tefillah. Meaning, like, let me say my taich, it's not that you're doing it wrong. It's not that you're doing it wrong. It's not a we're just talking before about burials. This is true of every halacha. Like if you bury somebody in a metal vault, it's not the pshat like you're missing a din. You didn't bury them. That's not called kavura. There's in every halacha, if you put green boxes on your head and you say this, I'm putting on tefillin, I'm doing the best I can, or I like green. So it's not that you're doing something wrong in hilchos tefillin. It's not tefillin. These are not tefillin that you're putting on. You're putting on something else, but you're not putting on tefillin. And that's the way. And in every single halacha, almost every halacha, there's the chefsa shel mitzvah. And the chefsa of mitzvah of tefillah, something maybe we didn't realize before, is kavana. Hava mina, it's coming to shul. Hava mina, it's saying the words. No, kavana, kol tefillah she'ena b'kavana, ena tefillah. It's not tefillah at all. V'im hispalo b'loi kavana, and if one would daven without kavana, chayzer mispalo b'kavana, you have to daven again. You didn't do anything. You shook an apple tree instead of shaking a lulav. Davening without kavana is so you have to therefore daven again.
It seems like something you did before today.
Well, let's see. How are you defining kavana? B'taras yadayim you do before, yeah?
He said, until you come to the time, let's do these things.
No, he's saying that, like, but you're skipping the main thing. What does kavana mean? That you do before you're doing during or after?
I'm saying.
It must be something you can do before to fit into this list.
With that, I'm also wondering if I can leave my opinion and say, I want to turn up to Devon. It's time to Devon, I want to be there.
Is that kavana?
I'm awesome.
So that's what we need to discover in the next few minutes. What is kavana? The Rambam doesn't tell us here what kavana is. He's making a good diuk that it must be a match. That's a good diuk. But he doesn't tell us what kavana is, which is, this is how the Yetzer Hara works. The words that we use the most, we have no idea what they mean. Leiv is another one. They go together. You use it all the time. I don't know what I mean. So, you daven without kavana, you daven again. And l'chatchila matzah daitoi mishubeshes. I don't know what I put in there. I didn't, but I'll read to you. Matzah daitoi mishubeshes v'libai tarud. Let's say you're just like your head is a mess. It happens, right? Like I'm just not holding my davening right now. Just had an argument with somebody in the middle of a business thing. I just lost $1 million, whatever it might be. Aser loy lispal. You're not even allowed to daven. Asher tisyashev daitoi. Why? Pashat pshat is because if you daven without kavana and it's not a tefillah, so what are you doing? You said a bunch of bracha lebatolos. That's the pasuk of pshat. So it's not just like you weren't yotzei tefillah, but much more than that. Asur lo lispalel achetis yashev daitoi. Calm down. Lefichach, says the Rambam further. Did I copy this in? No, I was trying to say something. Lefichach, so listen carefully. Haba min haderech. Let's say you travel. Now, traveling is a little bit different in the olden days than it is now. Let's say haba min haderech. Vuhu ayef, I'm exhausted. Oy meitzar, or I'm troubled. Asur lo lispal achetis yashev daitoi. So don't just go, I don't know what it means to daven on the plane. But even when you finished travel, you came home, you're not holding yet by davening, your head is all over the place. Amru Chachamim, so how long are you supposed to wait? Amru Chacham, says the Rambam, Shleisha Yamim. Achi anuach v'tizkar daita, until you get over it, v'acher kach yispala. It's a pella, so since, I'm going to just skip to the end, everybody knows that nowadays we don't have Kavana anyway, so so we became much more religious since we don't have Kavana. It was like on the way back from the airport, you chap a minyan, in the airport, on the airplane, like who doesn't, okay, so maybe you say ships are different, same thing as ships, like people are, so let's say somebody comes back from fighting in Gaza. So, famously, these tzaddikim, they had, right at the border, had minyanim, chap mincha, chap kabbalah Shabbos, But here's a halacha. But it just goes to show you why we don't keep it, we'll see in a minute. But it just goes to show you, the Rambam wasn't that long ago, 12th century, that the Rambam, it's very clear to the Rambam, and this Pshitas HaRambam, is that you simply don't daven if you traveled, and if you daven without Kavana, you daven again. Now, the Kesef Mishnah, the next halach is Ketzad Hiya Kavana. We'll get to that in a minute. But the Kesef Mishnah asks the obvious question, how would the Rambam know? This is not a Mefursha Gemara. How does the Rambam know that if you daven without Kavana, you should daven again? It's not a Mishnah. It's not a Gemara. It's a Chiddush of the Rambam. So how can he possibly know that? So the Kesef Mishnah says that it's a diuk in a Gemara. That's what a Rambam knows. A diuk in a Gemara, which changes everything. What's the diuk? In Soif Perek Tfilas HaShachar, at the end of in Brachas, on Daf Lamed in Brachas, the Gemara says like this: Amar Rabbi Yochanan. There the Gemara is handling with a sugya of whether you're allowed to say Musaf b'yechidus. We say Musaf b'yechidus. Let's say daven at home. You say on Shabbos, or Rosh Chodesh, or Yontiv. You say Shacharis and Musaf. That's one of the things you say b'yechidus. The Gemara wasn't sure. If you say Musaf, is that so, because it's like Korban Sibor? So is that something you only say b'tzibor, or is it something you can say b'yachid? So the Gemara wants to know. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Yochanan says, Ani ra'isi es Rabbi Yanai. I once saw Rabbi Yanai. Rabbi Yanai was a Gadol Adar, a Rabbi of Rabbi Yochanan. Ani ra'isi es Rabbi Yanai did tzali v'hader tzali. Like, in other words, Pashta says he was davening b'yachidus for whatever reason. And Rabbi Yochanan was watching the Rebbe daven, and he davened, he said Shemona Esrei, he stepped back, and he said Shemona Esrei again. Rabbi Yanai, must have been on Yontiv. Koloimar, so what was he saying? Koloimar v'lama lishtei tfilos. So it must be, said Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan was medayik in the fact that Rabbi Yanai davened twice, and he said, must be that he davened two tfilos, achas shel shachris v'achas shel musaf. Nobody davens two tfilos. He must have been davened shachris, and then he davened musaf. So that's how he interpreted the fact that the Rebbe davened twice. La'afukim imanda Omar hasam, and that's opposed to the Manda Omar in the Gemara, which says Ein Tfilas HaMusafin Ela B'tzibor. Because there's a Manda Omar that says so that Tfilas Musaf is only B'tzibor. So Rabbi Yochanan reported that Rabbi Yanai davened twice, he davened Musaf. Amar le Rabbi Yirmiyah le Rabbi Zera. This was the next generation. So Rabbi Yirmiyah, this came down to Masaira, and Rabbi Yirmiyah, who is, if you know Chazal, which you all do, Rabbi Yirmiyah was the most inquisitive, curious, and questioning of all the. Yes, always had interesting questions. If I'm allowed to say that about Amoraim, Rabbi Yirmiyah was like, Amarle Rabbi Yirmiyah l'Reb Zera. He says, how did Rabbi Yochanan come to this maskana that you're allowed to daven musaf b'yechidus? Dilma, maybe the pshat is. Meikara like kiven daita v'ashta kiven daita. Maybe there's a more easy teretz that Rabbi Yanai davened Shemona Esrei. He realized, hey, I didn't have kavana, so he davened again. And the Gemara says, okay, that is a possibility. It's no raya that you can daven musaf b'yechidus. That's what the Gemara says. Comes the Rambam and he says, so like, what is Rabbi Yirmiyah even talking about? Maybe he was mechaven, or he wasn't mechaven, so therefore he davened again. So what? Who says he davened again? Haraya from the question that Rabbi Yirmiyah asked Reb Zera about the interpretation of Rabbi Yochanan on the fact that Rabbi Yanai davened twice. From all of that story, you see that if you didn't daven b'kavana, daven twice. Comes the Rambam and he paskins that if you daven without kavana, you have to daven again. That's the whole makar. Is this like a diuk in the Gemara, if you will? Nobody argued with him in this. It must have been that was what they did. They went ahead and they davened again. And you see, even somebody as great as Rabbi Yanai that for generations, they're just trying to learn about why he took 3 steps back. And he went again, but daven without Kabbalah. Why did he daven again? You mean maybe it was the mitzvah? Oh, so that all the Noisei Kalim asked this on the Rambam. All the Noisei Kalim asked this on the Rambam. We still don't know that it's Ma'akiv Tefillah, but I guess if it's maybe it was Tefillah's Nadafa. But the Pashtus Pshat is that if it wasn't Ma'akiv the Tefillah, so then it would be a Bracha L'Batal. And that would be the positive shot. I also saw that they say that Tefillah's Nadava you have to make a hefsek of a certain amount of time between a regular Tfilas Chayv and a Tfilas Nadavid and make a hafsek. All kinds of truths. But your question is an excellent one. But this is how the Rambam learns the halacha. The Rambam learns this Gemara by saying that Tfilah b'lei Kavana you have to daven again. From the Kasha of Rabbi Yirmiyah. Chen Kosav Arosh. And the Rosh also agrees with this diuk in the Gemara. Further says so that's one halacha. Further it says the Rambam Tezayin Ketzad Hiya Kavana. What is it anyway? So let's just understand. The first question was Ketzad Alev Kavanas Alev Ketzad, and this question is Ketzad Hiya Kavana. Just to give me a translation here. What's the difference? These two questions. First Rambam starts Kavanas Alev Ketzad. And here he says, Ketzad hiya kavana. What do you say, David?
In what way does Kavanas Alev back in the tefillah? So he answered by saying that it's likuva.
It's likuva.
And now he's describing what it is.
So Kavanas Alev Ketzad, the first question, is a little bit wrong. It's not really Ketzad the way we usually understand Ketzad. It's more like how important is it? And here he's saying, Ketzad Kavana, what is it? It's interesting. So the word Ketzad is Mishtam Lutrei Ampin over here. So what is it? What is it? What are you supposed to do? And here's where we're all stuck. This is what you're supposed to do. Sheyifna libai b'chol hamachshavos mikol hamachshavos. You have to clear your mind. This is not easy. You have to clear your mind, which you do before davening, as you say. V'yira atzmai, now that you've cleared your mind, it's hard, the mind doesn't have an on-off switch, It's an active mind, even if you're active in learning, it's just, you can't just. So first thing is, yifna libai mikol hamachshavos. V'yira atzmai, now you have to imagine yourself, kilu oimei lifnei hashchina. You have to imagine yourself that you're standing in front of the Shechina. The Rambam says Shechina means you're standing in front of Hashem. That's what it means. Lefichach, so that's your kavanah, easy. Lefichach, tzarech leishiv ma'at koydem hatzvila. Best thing to do would be to sit a little bit before tefillah, kedei lechavenes libai, in order to lechavenes libai, va'acher kach yispalo b'nachas v'tachnonim. So take a moment, says the Rambam, Al pi halacha, he's saying, Ketzad hiya kavana, take a moment to clear your mind. So when we say the first halacha was Kavanas Alev Ketzad, so he tells us this halacha that it's ma'akiv tefillah, you got to daven again. So now our question is, what's ma'akiv tefillah? If I did what, if I didn't do what? And the answer to that is that if you didn't clear your mind, you didn't daven. Do I have Reb Shad in the Rambam? If I didn't clear my mind properly, and I've got things on my head, so in the first halacha, he already gave us an example of somebody who took a trip, but just anybody. Like if your mind is not cleared, you come to daven and your mind is not clear, which is like, that's me most of the time. So if your mind is not clear, so you didn't daven.
You used to take an hour.
Just take an hour, but at least a little bit. V'lo yaset tfilasai. And also, Halachi adds in here, it's not kind of a burden on your head, how many people feel. And therefore you have to wait a little bit after davening also. So I have to sit a little bit before davening, clear my mind, and then show it's not a masui. This seems to be a halach in the Kavanas Tefillah, that it's not a masui, and that's why you have to wait at least Daled Amos, Shiva Daled Amos, after you daven Shemona Esrei. You can't keep running. Hasidim Rishonim, like Chaim says, everyone knows the Gemara. Hasidim Rishonim Rishonim Shah Koydem HaTefillah Shah Acher HaTefillah. They used to take a shah, if a shah means an hour, let's say. They used to spend an hour before tefillah getting in the mood for davening. They used to daven for an hour. 3 hours. No, because Dvarim HaChosim, it's not talking about what you're doing in your heart. It means that if the stereo is blasting, you got to shut it off. If your baby is crying, you have to give it to your wife. Or not daven. In other words, these are halachas. You're not allowed to daven with holding a baby, holding a valuable thing. Those are things that are occupying a certain part of my mind. Like if I'm holding a Sefer Torah and I'm davening Shemoneh Esrei, which sounds so good, it's not good because there's a part of my mind, whether it's conscious or unconscious, which is concentrating on not dropping that Sefer Torah, which is good, but it's not a way to daven Shemoneh Esrei. It's not the way to daven Shemoneh Esrei. And also a person, also, whatever. So these are things, or there's a big noise. You have to go to a different place.
I mean, it's asur and it doesn't count, or that it's not like tefillah?
It's not a tefillah, and therefore maybe it's a bracha l'batola. You have to daven again. Which is why one of the, people are makpid on people talking in shul, or making noise in shul. It's not like, everybody understands what's wrong with talking in shul, and here, Baruch Hashem, not that much talking in shul. But there's a chiyuv, I think, maybe on my part or the Gabayim's part, to make sure that you're taking away all the things that are disturbing the Kavana of tefillah, because that's ma'akiv is a tefillah, right? There's like a chiyuv to do that. So hence the minhag to bang and to all that stuff. That's where it comes from. Because you're not allowed to have something here. People are coming to daven. You understand what I'm saying? In other words, besides for the obvious thing, like you don't disturb other people, or you're not allowed to talk in the Beis HaKnesses. Besides for all that, it's something which is disturbing, and there's a chiyuv midinei tefillah that you have to get rid of the disturbing things.
What's the nafka between holding a Sefer Torah and holding a sit?
A sitter is not as valuable. Is not as valuable. That's why.
Well, that's Samech Gula Tefillah. Samech Gula Tefillah. You have to sit down before Tefillah.
You mean it's a hefsek, you mean?
Yeah. Is that called a hefsek or not?
I'm thinking mincha. It's not a hefsek because it's part of the tefillah. The reason you're saying gula tefillah is because the gula has the same din of Shemoneh Esrei. That's why it's not a hefsek.
So that's where you sit down. If you're going to sit down, you'd sit down then.
Yes. Now let's move to the Shulchan Aruch. How do we paskin? Here's a sheet like it. So the Shulchan Aruch says in Tzadik Ches. Shulchan Aruch says in Tzadik Ches. Beginning here. The Shulchan Aruch's like in two places. Very important to follow with me. Hamispalel tzarich sheyichaven belibai. Now he's not quoting the Rambam here, correct? It's not a Rambam. Hamispalel tzarich sheyichaven belibai perish hamiloi shemoitzi b'svasav. That when you daven, you have to be mechaven. There's a new translation of mechaven. Mechaven really only means, what does the word mean? Orient, focus, I think to direct. Like when you aim a gun, mechaven. Right? So, I don't know if focus is right, or orient. I don't know if it's right. Like mechaven. Right, like kivun. But here it means something else. Amispal sarach shechaven belibai perish hamilois shemaitzi b'svasav. So first thing is you got to think of the perish hamilois. What do the words mean? A lot of people out right there. V'yachshav kehillat shivtei Yeshurun. Also, you have to have a kavana, like the Rambam says, of Shechina Kenegdoi, that I'm standing in front of the Shechina. The Yasir, in that regard, Yasir Kol HaMachshavos HaTordoi Soy, like the Rambam says, you have to get rid of all the distracting thoughts. Your mind has to be pure and ready for doing tefillah here. In other words, if you got something else in your mind plus tefillah, then you're lacking kavana. You got to use your whole mind for this, even though the mind is capable of multifunctioning, and you could think of, many people could think of and do many things at once, but you really can't. It's just a fast program. It looks like you are, but you're not. And for this, you need, as soon as something else comes up, but there's just let me just say this, where just to think about it. Cell phones created a whole new challenge in life, and lahavdil, like something like a Sefer Torah or a baby. Like I think we're at a point where it's not just something you carry around. It's like a piece of your brain is like almost connected to it. Like you're hearing. I'm not giving mussar. I'm just saying a new psychological phenomenon which I don't know that existed. 100 years ago or 30 years ago, that there's this kind of like we're in touch with it, like constantly making sure you have it. You wouldn't leave the house without it.
Fountain readings.
Yeah, and you're in touch with it. So in touch with it.
Also your life and identity.
Yeah, everything. Yeah, so no, I'm sure it just presents, besides for what's obviously not good about that, but it presents a new case of like you're not giving your whole, just like this, like if your cell phone is on and you're trying to talk to somebody, obviously you're not giving your whole kavana. Somebody just showed me this research thing, even if you don't answer it. So people like turn over their phone. So you turn over your phone, and they do research. Does the other person feel now that you're paying complete attention to them? Almost somebody feels any better about that. You turn over your phone. The only way the other person feels that you're really paying attention is if you shut your phone off. It's like turning off your oxygen, Like how much am I supposed to, It's a very interesting. I can't think of any thing that was like that, except for oxygen, and. In history, I just can't think of anything that was like that. It's like a whole new thing, and it's very. What are you going to do? Shut your phone off, and the other person is looking at their phone. So that's also not fair. So it becomes like a word of phones, And if you'll look at it from my tiny glimpse, and I'm not here to talk about mussar. I'm just saying a phenomenon that most issues of these days, and this is new. Most there's so many, maybe most issues of parenting and kids and shalom bayis and connectivity between people, even in business, it comes down to the fact that everybody's got their cell phone on. And even if they're not looking at it, because you're a Baal Midos, they're not going to look at it, but there's some kind of a zika that's there. And I think, and I'm just exploring this halachically, and therefore, I don't do this, but I'm just exploring the idea of could be that the only way to daven with your cell phone in your pocket is to actually shut it off. I got to the first step of this. I did it once, and nothing happened. Nothing happened. Obviously, I'm not going to answer the phone during Shemoneh Esrei. I don't even look at the phone during Shemoneh Esrei. But somehow or another, if you're not, you're disconnected. So disconnected, like Shabbos, You're disconnected. And Hatzalah people, let's say, do what they have to do. It's pikuach nefesh. Nobody's criticizing them. But in fact, they're on it every minute. So thank God they're on it every minute. That's for a mitzvah. But stam, to be on it every minute, it's occupying valuable space. Okay, further with the Shulchan Aruch, because that's really just a side point. Yachshav, all dealing in the dinim of Kavana, ki ilu haya medaber lifnei melech basar v'dam haya mesader dvarim v'cham ben yafel l'ba yikoshel. If I was talking to a melech, obviously, or an important person, I would be mesader myself well. I wouldn't want to stutter. Yikoshel, I wouldn't want to mumble. Kal v'chaymer lifnei melech malach malach HaKadosh Baruch Hu shu chayker kol machshavos. V'kach hayu oisim chasidim v'anshe maisa, and this is what the great people did. Hayu mispoidedim u'mechaven b'tzilasam they would daven and have kavana in their tefillah, and we're getting a little bit of clarity, and I hope I want to be able to get to the real halachic lamdusha point here. But they would daven asher yemagiyim, listen to this Shulchan Aruch, lehispashtos hagashmius, ulis gabras koyach hasichli, ad shel yemagiyim karav lamalas hanavua. Lashon HaMachaber. That when I'm davening Shemoneh Esrei, it almost feels like this is one of the things that's ma'akiv the tefillah, that I'm supposed to get to a place of, let's just do those words again, hispashtus hagashmius, uliskabros koyach hasichli, ad shel yemagim karav l'malas hanavua. It's hard to do. It's hard to even know what it means. So hispashtus hagashmius means that I am not, right now I'm not feeling the pains, the aches, the misery, the even the simcha, even the comfort. Like I'm out of my body. You would think this is somewhere in the Arizal. Hispashtus hagashmius. Ulis gabras koyach hasichli. In that time, your seichel takes over. Arizal's against that also. Says your seichel is still too much gashmius. That's what he says. It's too much. This is the easy route. And that's what a Navi has to do to get a Nevuah. And that's what we have to do every time we daven Shemoneh Esrei. What's the connection between a Navi and davening Shemoneh Esrei? By the Dimion. Hashem's talking to him by a Navi. What's the Dimion? So the answer is not you're talking to Hashem. It's in order to have this kind of hiskarvus HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you got to take away every mechitza and every possible separation. Kamash Milan, that the main point of davening Shemoneh Esrei is to have that moment of connectivity with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Like a Navi has. Navi connected.
Will require simcha.
Right. I didn't say you shouldn't be for simcha. It has to be daven b'toich simcha. I'm saying you shouldn't, even if I'm saying, wow, great air conditioner in here. So, or basura toiva, so that's a simcha, but that's a gashmi simcha. That's a.
What is this set?
So, which I said that the Arizal doesn't even hold of.
Yeah.
So, I think what the Shulchan Aruch means, mind over matter. So, koach hasichli means that I'm thinking about what's right and wrong objectively, and not what the ramifications there are in my comfort, and what's good for me, and what's not good for me, and what's my wife going to think, and what's this going to happen, what's the community going to say. Sichli, if a person has the luxury to think sichli, the Arizal comes along and he says, as is expressed by the Reb Chaim Vital, that seichel is also too much because seichel is only just a tool in the toolbox of Gashmias. Meaning, like we tend to say, I say this all the time, we tend to say, well, we are what we think. Well, not what we think. Your thoughts are here and you're here. So the thoughts are tied in already. That's just a tool. Just like your emotion is a tool, and it's just a tool. What you think? It's good to think. I'm all for it. One should not do things thoughtlessly, but according to Arizal, that's like the wrong way to daven. The way to daven is just to be. No hiskabers of anything, or just all the things that I feel is that which we consider to be ourselves. You can just kind of like put that on the side. It's like putting aside the ego. It's a good thing to put it aside. It's a very important to understand that, like Hashem gave us an ego, and without it we probably couldn't grow, or we couldn't get our children to grow, and like ego is a good thing, but ultimately it's a bad thing because ultimately all the embarrassment and pain and affliction and discomforts that we feel in life. Somebody yelled at me, somebody thinks this, somebody thinks that. It's all about the ego. So it's a good thing to boost you and say, okay, I want to be the top of my class or win the game, but it's actually an actual fact. You don't get rid of it at some point. I'm saying it drastically. I'm not even saying like keep it under control. Get rid of it. I think this is their result. Just get rid of it. At some point, you become like Moshe Rabbeinu, that the Yanav Mikol Adam is Pashut. It's not even it's not a thing. Okay, let's go further before I get involved with that. The Bir Halacha says as follows: Yispalo derech tachanunim. We cover that later on. The Shulchan Aruch says when you daven in Gimel, it says Yispalo derech tachanunim. Means you should daven like a poor person, begging, standing in front of a rich person. It's another Kavana. So it says the Bir Halacha. How careful you have to be, says the Bir Halacha, about all these halachas. She's talking about all of them. Because there are many poiskim that if you don't have this kavanas, you got to daven again. Who just said that? Rambam, not just by. Zahalohema Habach Eliyarabba Muchach Me'Beis Yosef V'Maimer Mordechai Magid Gibarim Haichichu, and the Magid Gibarim learns it from the Rambam, which we just learned this Rambam. I don't know what's the deal. It's clear in the Rambam. What's not clear in the Rambam is that all of these kavanas mean you have to daven again. But I think it's clear in the Rambam. He says maybe you can learn the Rambam differently. Then he says, I skip a little bit for the interest of time, ordinarily pashut. It also seems clear to me that all these dinim of kavana, and this gets us into a very important halacha, because so far we're learning things which are almost impossible to be makayim in Shemoneh Esrei. Ordinarily pashut, but the Chafetz Chaim makes it a little bit easier, for it seems to me to be obvious. Even, let's say it this way, according to the Rambam, Phew. Okay, all of this kavana that we're talking about is only in the avos, in the first paragraph of Shemoneh Esrei. Shar bracha, says the Mishnah Berurah, rak lechatchila. Of course, you should try, but that's not the din. The din of being ma'akiv, that you have to daven again, let's just make sure we understand what we're saying, is if you didn't have these kavanas in the avos. In the avos, it is ma'akiv. And not in the avos, it's not ma'akiv. The whole thing is about kavana. So how do we know this? So we move on to Kuf Aleph. Travel with me quickly because I want to get to the point. Turn over a few pages. It says the Shulchan Aruch Hamispalel in Kuf Aleph, Sif Aleph. Certainly when you daven, you have to have kavanah about everything. All the brachas, Shemoneh Esrei brachas, 19 brachas, you have to have kavanah. Let's say a person says, Ani lo yachol, I just can't concentrate for that long to have kavanah in all 18 brachas. At least the avos. And if you weren't mechaven in the avos, let's say you woke up at Atochonin, which is common because the avos is not sort of benefiting me directly. When I start thinking about give me some das and give me your refuah shalema and take my tshuva, that's when I engage more in the tefillah. So says the Shulchan Aruch very clearly, afal pisha kiven b'chol shar yachzor v'yispalel. Like the main thing is the avos. And if you had kavana there, even b'diavad, you didn't have kavana with everything else. You could daven further. And if you didn't have kavana in the avos, even if you had kavana for everything afterwards, you have to daven again. Yachzor v'yispal. Fursha din and Shulchan Aruch. So you have to have kavana in the avos. important for me to explain. Why should you have Kavana in the office? Why is this more important than Ata Kadosh V'Shimcha Kadosh? Sim Shalom Tovu Vracha. What?
That's the connection. This whole thing is about connection.
A little noch besser.
In the Zuchus of the others. It's the Shabbat.
So if you didn't have Kavana that I'm doing this in the Schuz Avos, your Shemar Esrei is not nothing.
How can you ask for anything before you speaking Hashem?
Until you what?
Until you have a recognition for your standing.
Okay. So I have a recognition.
Recognition of the relationship. Where you come from, and you use the information of that.
Okay, so being that everybody's almost saying what I want to say, I'll just say it. and that is this. Like, we're going to learn, maybe today, maybe next, are we learning again next week?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Next week? So let me say this very, very important aside. And that is that you can daven al pi halacha with a tremendous amount of kavod, with a tremendous amount of kavana. Rafa'inu, you're crying. Rafa'inu, somebody said. It doesn't mean that you're standing in front of Hashem. Like, God is not your therapist. It could be good. Shari Zemois, like, davenology is very, like techniques are very, very important here. But you could be crying and davening to the wall. You could be davening to some Avodah Zarah. They cried also. Shofach Libam, it says in Tanakh, they were Shofech Libam, Lifnei HaShera. The fact that you're like doing all this davening, it could be like you're just worshiping Avodah Zarah. Probably not, but it's not necessarily davening. So what's the kavana? We're going to learn this clearly, which is 100% ma'akiv on davening. It's not about the avos. The kavana, as we're going to learn, is these words, Da lifnei mi ata omed. You have to know before whom you stand. Okay, before whom do I stand? If you don't have, I'm going to just advance a halacha here, and then I want to learn the Reb Chaim Brisker inside. But here's the aside. If you have this one thing, Da lifnei mi ata omed, you know before whom you stand, then you've davened. If you don't have Da lifnei mi ata omed, you can have all the kavanah in the world and all the pirush hamilim, or milos, as the Shulchan Aruch says, in the world. You could be standing there for 25 minutes. You didn't daven. So the Da lifnei mi ata omed, I'm saying something which is a clear halacha. The Da lifnei mi ata omed, before whom do I stand? You have to ask yourself that question, and it's a very complex question because I don't know. Do we have any kind of a clear understanding of Hashem that we should know Da lifnei mi ata omed? It's almost an impossible task. I mean, as soon as you conjure up some kind of an image of God, buzz, you're out. Asur to start imagining what Hashem looks like, or and people come into it with all kinds of wrong ideas of, like, well, maybe it's energy, maybe it's like helium, maybe so the answer is we don't know yet. This is the one kavana, which is ma'akiv. So you can think things about Hashem, let's say, well, He created the world, so there must be Hashem, things like that. But are you mekayim with that, this basic halacha of Da lifnei mi ata omed? So let me say what the Chazal give us an out here. There's really two things. And they're both in the Rambam here. And then we'll elaborate on it. Number one, there are certain things you can understand, certain things we can't understand with our head, with our brain. But when we daven, we're not davening with our brain. And that's why I said before, the Rizal talks about hispashtus kol haguf v'gam haseichel. Argues with his chavrusa, the Beis Yosef. Hispashtus from everything, because with seichel you're not going to get this Da lifnei mi ata omed. You're not going to get it. You could be the Rambam's Mer Nevuchim. You're not going to get it. You could be the Arizal. You're not going to get it because Leis Machshava Tzvisabeh. Period. There's just no way to understand Hashem. Forget about it. What can we do? We can say this, and this is how we're Yotze. It's a Chiddush of Chazal. We can say with our Seichel, like we don't really know that much about Hashem, so we don't really know who we're standing and davening in front of, but we do know that that what we're focusing on here is Halikeinu v'Halekei Aviseinu. This is the ones that the giants of history, the Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, who nobody compared to them in history in terms of intellect, emotion, and Echad Haya Avram being able to go against the whole world. Echad Haya Avram, he chose you. So the first thing to sort of like focus on, I think this is Kavana. I think that's what the word means in the first din of the Rambam. I'm going to show you this all inside. I want to tell you this aside. That the first focus has to be, I don't know, I'm davening to the one and only one that Avraham chose and went against the whole world. I'm davening to the one and the only one that Yitzchak was willing to give his life for. And I'm davening for the one that Yaakov Avinu said I'm going to dedicate my life for and all of history for. So it's not the schus. It's not the schus time. It's not about the schus. It's the identification. And by this identification, like who you davening to exactly, the one Avram Avinu davened, good. That's good, right? Whatever he did, that's what I'm doing. So that's the most. Now, did Avram Avinu himself be masig, or was he masig that he couldn't be masig? This basically, I don't know the answer to that. I know this is seemingly a machlek as the Rambam and the Rebbe, but this simple sort of hashkafik yesod I'm telling you is I'm gonna show you if you stick with me in the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch, all the way up to Reb Chaim Brisker Chidush Reb Chaim. This yesod, the yesod is that we have to have the Kavana li'ikuva in Shemona Esrei is the avos, and the reason that's ma'akev is because if not, I don't know lifnei mi'ata oimed. I'm missing the main thing. You got a lot of Kavana, but you don't have lifnei mi'ata oimed. If you have the Kavana, meaning if you know before whom you stand, and you daven Shemona Esrei, I've got that good. It's not that I'm being Meshabeach Hashem. I'm just identifying. This is very important. People say, okay, well, first be Meshabeach Hashem, then daven. Not Meshabeach. Isn't it our shvachim? We're identifying HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the world, and now we can daven to him. Now, I didn't know. Of course, you should have kavanah. You should have kavanah of Pirush Hamilim all the way through to Shemona Esrei. But if you don't, okay. But I'm still connecting to Hashem. So you get the Baal Shem Tov stories of, the guy who whistled and he was Yotze. Providing he was Mechavan Ba'avos, I guess. But it's not, even though it's not the preferred way to do, but I'm davening. So of course, if I'm davening with the Dalif Nemi, that's a Kavana, Ha'ma'akeves. I'm missing side points, but I'm davening. And on the other hand, if I daven the whole thing b'kavana, like the Shulchan Aruch says, even if I daven everything with kavana, but I woke up after the avos, that's not called davening. You have to daven again. And the whole halacha of when you have to daven again, when you don't have to daven again, so presumably Rabbi Yanai the Great, right? Rabbi Yanai, by the way, the Gemara says that Rabbi Yochanan was quoting, he watched Rabbi Yanai, the same name. Yochanan became Yanai, and Yanai became Yochanan. Who Yanai, who Yochanan, the Gemara says. It's his namesake. So the Yochanans and the Yanais have to do with the Greeks and the Romans. But what he was saying is, presumably Rabbi Yanai, Rabbi Yochanan didn't want to say this, but Rabbi Yirmiyah did say it, that presumably Rabbi Yanai, like he davened the whole thing. I'm sure he davened with the same kavanah we're davened, but he lost for a moment the Dalif Nemiato I made. He lost that Dalif Nemiato I made, and if you're losing that Iker Kavana, you daven again. So when you talk about the halachas of when you have to daven again, it's all about Dalif Nemiato I made. That's the halacha. If you're talking about where the Kavana is Ma'akev, meaning why you have to have Kavana and Avos, at least always like the Bir Halacha says there, and here he's going to say it again. So it's only talking about the avos because that's the identification. And when we're talking about, there's two kinds of kavana, which I believe is the first Rambam and the second Rambam, which let's just review. What I'll show you is one kind of kavana, which is like sort of like the let's call it the micro kavana of knowing what the words mean and saying them correctly and doing all that. But the real kavana of Dalif Nemiato, I mean, look, gentlemen, halacha l'maisa. You get up to stand Shemona Esrei. Don't wait till next week. Just know this now. You get up to stand Shemona Esrei. You stand there until you know before whom you're standing. Otherwise, you're not davening. Everything else, we're humans. We're living in a very distracting world. But here's like the bottom line, minimal share, if you will, is that you know before who you stand. I'm connecting for that one moment with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I know before whom I stand. Now ask, take the advice of Chazal and say these words in Shemona Esrei Brachos. For the Dalif Nemiato, I mean, that's the Klal Gadol B'din.
What's the chiluk between that and Shivisi?
No chiluk at all. So, no chiluk at all. And thank you very much. Because if you look, part of this whole idea that you should be even like a Navi comes from the Rambam, also in Mar Nevuchim. And there he says, how do I know who made up these words? Dalif Nemiato Emei. So the Rambam says it comes from Shivisi Hashem L'Negdi Sami. So just to end off with Halacha L'Maisa, says the Ramah, Ha'idna, nowadays, Ein Chayzrin Bishul Chesrein Kavana. You don't go back because you didn't have Kavana. This needs a lot of iyun. It's a big Ramah. That's a big Ramah. Why? So cynical. Sha'af b'chazara karvu shaloi chavin. Like, meaning, now...
It's the same category as a chassan, stands to double mark.
Something like that. Im kain lama yachzer. So what's the use of going back if you're just going to do the same thing again? Which is why? Like, so what we need to do, here's a circle, just maybe if you're going to come next week, take the paper and bring it back. But what kavana is he talking about? He's talking about the kavana of avos. Is he talking about the Pirush Milim? Like, nafkamina is like this. Like, let's say I didn't say a bracha, Baruch Atah Hashem Magen Avram. So I do go back? Or is it only after I say Magen Avram? Or until Atakodesh, like I never go back because I'm not going to say, like what are we talking about here? So this is the Machlokes and Mishabura and the Chayodam and the Briskers. It's a very fascinating argument which we have to get to. But at the end of the day, you finish Shemona Esrei and you say, I didn't. What I think it means is I didn't identify HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I davened for 25 minutes. I really thought about all the chaylim on my list, but I didn't know Dalif Nemiato Oimed. I think L'Kula Alma, by the way. You have to daven again. Now the Ramah says don't daven again because if you're not aware, you're not aware. But that might not be so pashut if you didn't have Kavana in the Avos. So that's what we have to say to Chai Adam. Okay, we'll leave it here. Thank you.